Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all doing really well, except for some of you. We need to have a talk. Before we start today's video, I want to give a quick content warning. We're going to be talking about serial killers. And later on, we'll be looking into their super fans and the kind of content they've created, so it's gonna get a bit weird, or a lot weird honestly, so viewer discretion's advised. If you've been on my channel before, you probably know that I like to dabble in exploring the different internet communities that have been growing up over the past few years. We looked at the LinkedIn corner of the internet recently, as well as in the past we've looked at the male writing community or the boss babe corner, which both are definitely frightening and concerning in their own special way. But I think the community we're looking at today definitely takes the terms frightening and concerning to a whole new level. Like, dare I say it's becoming a bit unhinged? It's definitely hard to give this community one term because there are so many different subgenres of it at this point, but I guess the easiest way to identify it is that it's the true crime community. If you've been on the internet ever, but especially these days, you've probably come across true crime content in some shape or form. Like maybe you had that JCS video show up in your suggestions on YouTube recently, or maybe you saw a Ted Bundy fan cam. I didn't pull that out of nowhere, surprisingly. That is readily available content for you to consume if you'd like to. Or please don't. Either way, it's very clear true crime is the it content right now, and considering the amount of variations I've seen recently, I thought it would make for an interesting video to kind of start looking through all of it, because I feel like the genre as a whole is starting to kind of go a bit off the rails. Before we start though, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Grammarly, who sponsored today's video. Some of you guys might remember that I have talked about Grammarly on my channel a few times before. They're a digital writing assistant that's actually helped 30 million people write more clearly and effectively every day. I've actually been one of them for a few years now. I use them back in university with any kind of important papers and stuff like that. And with school back, I honestly think it's a must-have. They got free features like the set and goal one that helps make sure the tone of your writing is tailored to the audience you're trying to write to. And they have a free word count feature, which is super helpful for essays, so you don't have to keep track of whether you've hit the word count or not. Plus the synonym feature finds new words for you to sub in for ones that you might be overusing. It's super easy to use as well. All you have to do is download the browser extension and do your thing, while Grammarly double checks your work to make sure there's no spelling, grammar, punctuation errors, or mistakes. Plus it's free, so you have nothing to lose. I actually recently upgraded to Grammarly Premium almost about a year ago at this point, and I've noticed that it saved me a ton of time with the advanced features, and it just makes me a lot more confident that my writing is going to be professional and effective. And if you get Premium, you get vocabulary and clarity suggestions. I found those two features especially have been really helpful for me, just because they're the most common issues I had with my writing beforehand. I could be a bit wordy, but I find these days my writing's a lot more clear and concise, and it doesn't take any time on my end because it's Grammarly giving me those suggestions in real time. But regardless of whichever option you choose, you're going to benefit from using it because it's like having a mini professor whisper tips in your ear while you're writing. With back to school season here though, you can make sure you're prepared with tools like Grammarly by going to grammarly.com/Aonso to sign up for a free account. And if you want to get those extra features, you can upgrade to Grammarly Premium for 20% off to help you save time and work more efficiently. Thanks again to Grammarly for sponsoring today's video. If you're interested, I would definitely check it out in the description box, but otherwise, let's get to the video. So before we start getting into the haywire corners of the true crime community, I kind of wanted to talk about the initial fascination and honestly obsession that we have at this point as a society with true crime. I'll be completely honest, I'm not really that surprised that true crime is as popular as it is on the internet these days, because it was big when the internet wasn't a thing. Shows like The First 48 or To Catch a Predator were huge in their heyday, and there's also fictional spin-offs that have done really well, like Criminal Minds. I even remember as a kid when Tori Stafford went missing, my family constantly being glued to the TV for updates. I'm sure there's psychology behind this, but I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not gonna pretend to be one in this video, but I definitely recommend a video by Shane Spear here on YouTube, where she goes more into that, and she honestly did a great job. But in the meantime over here, I'll just speak from my personal experience, and I guess the reason that I think I was so interested in it, which was just this mix of fear and suspense. It's actually kind of backwards when I think about it, because I remember when I was younger, I was super into true crime, but that was also the time in my life when I was the most concerned about being kidnapped. Like I had to plan A, B, C, pretend my calculator's a phone if a car slows down while I'm walking home from school mentality. So it's kind of weird that my resolution was to watch as much true crime content as I could. I'm talking TV shows, movies, books, like anything I could get my hands on. On the suspense end, when you hear a story of someone being taken or a crime happening and there's hope it can be resolved, I think it's human nature to hope everything turns out okay and to continue checking in on it for updates on the story. It's a real-life cliffhanger, and the same goes for the stories where there technically are happy endings. I think of memoirs by survivors like J.C. Lee Dugard, where I read that back in 2011, but I still remember that part about the pine cone where she had said it was so symbolic for her because it was the last thing she touched before she was kidnapped for 18 years. It's chilling and horrifying stuff, but why is it so addictive to read about? But I noticed that the older that I got, I was actually less interested in consuming true crime content. I guess the easiest conclusion I can draw is that maybe it's related to the fact that I just am not nearly as concerned about being kidnapped as I used to be as a kid. But what I found really odd recently is that YouTube in the past year has been suggesting a ton of true crime related stuff to me. But what's even weirder is the range of content available. Since it is a super popular genre right now, I guess it really isn't that shocking that there would be that many different options for people to choose from. It's kind of like the same cycle that everything goes through with the internet, where a community gets popular, and then obviously a lot of people want to make that style of content, but they put a personal twist on it so it's unique, so you end up getting a ton of different subgenres. But I think it can start to get a bit weird when the original state of that content is already looked at by some people as ethically controversial. Obviously, the original version of true crime content would be somebody doing their research on a case that they find interesting, presenting it to their audience, and then having a discussion about it. Maybe they're sharing it because it's a crazy story, or it's unsolved and they're trying to raise awareness about it. But as of recent, that isn't the only kind of true crime stuff you can find. You can also find the beauty video hybrid version, where it's kind of following the same style as the original, but instead it's like a get ready with me and they talk about their makeup while they're doing it. Beyond that, we venture into the more interesting variations of that kind of content, where we have house flipping and ASMR, of all things. Because there's nothing like being asked if you want hardwood or tile while being reminded that somebody died on the floor that you're standing on. Or alternatively, somebody whispering that to you while they tuck you into bed. Her arms were cut off. Her legs were cut off. Her ears were cut off. Most of you guys probably don't know about the house flipping version, mainly because it was a show on Quibi, which nobody downloaded, but it was called Murder House Flip, and it focused on people who were flipping houses where someone had previously died or been killed. To me, the concept sounds like a bunch of old executives just took a list of Google trends, threw them in a randomizer, and then just picked the first combination it spat out, and then thought people would eat it up. So Murder House Flop definitely didn't work out, but that doesn't mean that the other communities I've talked about haven't. They've actually been thriving, and it feels like as of right now, the love for true crime, or I guess like the obsession over it, is higher than ever. And living through today's internet, I feel like it was only a matter of time that people would start taking it a bit too far. This is where we're going to talk about the fangirls for a bit. And I think this is one of the more universally agreed on topics when it comes to the true crime community, which is that the people who are treating these serial killers like they're K-pop idols are a bit concerning. I'm sure we all know at this point, though, that Ted Bundy didn't just recently get fans. He had fans back when he was alive and convicted, but I think the whole idea of that trend starting online didn't really start on TikTok, but more so Tumblr. When you actually think about it, though, that platform is so insidious. Like, we're still seeing the effects of it, even though it died off in 2018 on new platforms. It never leaves. It's like a bad rash. And don't even get me started on the fanfiction, because that does exist, and it's quite frankly disturbing. I genuinely don't want to talk about it for longer than like 45 seconds, because honestly, it's going to be uncomfortable and weird for me to talk about, and it's going to be uncomfortable and weird for you to listen to, and I'd really recommend you do not go looking for it, even if you're curious, because it's just awful. But I do think it's worth mentioning briefly, because there's Jeffrey Dahmer ex-Ted Bundy fanfiction that exists. But what's even more insane to me is that most of these fanfics had disclaimers that said, I believe the victims and I believe that these guys are guilty and I don't mean this to offend them or be disrespectful. And you're just kind of sitting there reading that like, okay, then why are you writing this then? Can you imagine any of the victims' family coming across fanfics with descriptions like Ted Bundy encounters a treat while taking a break in Florida, or Ted finds the love of his life while driving one night? How do you even explain that? You can't, though. That's the thing. Like, you literally can't explain something like that. It's not even a matter of touching grass anymore. Like, some of you guys genuinely need to touch a phone and dial a therapist. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with therapy, but you just need it. But But if by chance you thought this couldn't possibly get any worse, like it cannot get weirder than this, there's merch. We're officially past it getting weird. I don't know what territory we're in, but I don't like it. But I get that it's easy to sit here and agree that the people taking it too far according to everyone's standards are taking it too far. I don't think you're going to find anybody that disagrees that these fan cams and fanfiction are unbelievably weird and disrespectful. But what about the other content online? Would a victim's family feel comfortable seeing a traumatic story of theirs being used in a get ready with me or an ASMR video that you're meant to relax and fall asleep to? True crime has become such a popular genre that now you have a million podcasts and videos all trying to spice up the content to make it more unique and click-worthy, at the possible expense of bastardizing the story they're trying to tell in the first place. And we've seen the fallout of people telling stories that aren't theirs to tell online before. And it usually ends up with the affected family being harassed about a part of their life they're either trying to get over or have been able to for the most part, but are now reliving it all over again thanks to a bunch of internet sleuths who want to play Clue. That's the other thing about true crime content. It has a lot more strings attached to it than any other genre of content you might be making on the internet. If the story you're telling is one that you've talked to the family about and they're fine with you raising awareness about, then of course that's great. But what if it's a situation where you haven't talked to them and it turns out they actually didn't want anybody bringing it back up? And now they have your audience hitting them up on every and all social media trying to solve the mystery themselves. Like you're just existing as somebody who had something traumatic and awful happen to either yourself or someone you love, but now you could be the potential target for somebody revisiting that whole story, bringing it all back up again, and making you relive the experience over and over again. And don't get me wrong here, I totally understand that most of this content is well-intentioned, but I don't think that means that there aren't going to be unintentional side effects like turning somebody's trauma into an entertainment scavenger hunt hybrid. Like, of course, that Ted Bundy x Jeffrey Dahmer merch is super gross, but shirts like these are also very weird as well. Probably thinking about food or serial killers. Murderino, a true crime enthusiast who A, stays sexy, B, stays out of the forest, and C, does not get murdered. Or if for some reason you wanted something Christmas related, you could also get it's either serial killers, documentaries, or Christmas movies. Are we either slaying or slaying? Riddle me this. How about neither? I get that these days when you really like something, it becomes a part of your personality pretty quickly because you label yourself as a part of a community, and that doesn't seem weird when it's concerning a movie or band, but it just feels icky to me that people have turned something involving real people's nightmare moments of their lives into a quirky personality trait, as if it's like being a wine mom or liking tacos or something. And I know it probably makes me sound a bit overly insensitive, but I guess the easiest way to explain what it feels like in my head is that if you were to go up to an athlete and you're a sports fan and you're like, hey, I love sports, that seems normal. But if you were a massive fan of true crime and you went up to somebody who had something true crime related happen to them and go, damn, I love true crime, you'd feel a bit stupid and insensitive, right? And that's not me saying that people shouldn't watch true crime content at all. I used to watch it a lot when I was younger, and I totally get why people are into it, and there are a lot of positives that have come out of true crime content. Closed cases have been reopened. People falsely convicted of crimes are getting a second chance thanks to creators popularizing their story and sparking public outrage. Law enforcement are being held accountable for sloppy investigations. These are all great things, but I just don't think the only extremes when it comes to true crime are limited to people who are legitimate fans of serial killers. I think a lot of aspects of the true crime community that are normalized for the sake of entertainment are also inappropriate. I guess ultimately my issue is that the genre is getting the same treatment that any other kind of successful content would, with merch and memes and dozens of spin-offs, but it's a lot more sensitive than other types of content and needs to be treated differently. There are just so many more things you need to consider when you're making true crime content. Like, we haven't even considered the fact that some people might be accidentally spreading misinformation because they missed something when they were doing their research, and then they spread that to their massive audience. And at that point, it wouldn't matter if it was an honest mistake or not because it's already been put out there and a lot of people might not see your correction. That's one of the dangers that comes with content that can be made or posted by anyone online. Crime shows have been criticized for turning trauma into entertainment, but at the very least they have a vetting process for information since they're held accountable by their bosses and and their network. Versus with user-generated content like YouTube videos and podcasts, there isn't really anyone to hold them accountable for how they tell a story except for themselves and their audience. I guess going through this video, it wasn't really meant to be this definitive stance on true crime content, but just kind of looking at the way that it's transformed over the past few years and whether we're kind of pushing the boundaries a bit too far. I don't think that true crime content shouldn't exist or that the people who make it or enjoy watching it are terrible people, but I just think that that kind of content involves a lot more care. I just think it can be easy to forget when you have a new podcast episode you have to put out or a new video that these stories involve real people and the victims' families' lives are still going on. I know I say at the end of every video that I'm interested to see what you guys think because I just do like talking with you guys about those topics, but I think out of all the videos I've done so far, this one especially, I'm so curious to know what you guys think about it, mainly because since it's such a popular genre, I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this right now do engage with true crime content. So I'd love to know what you think about the whole idea of the ethics behind it, what's pushing it too far, what's being more respectful. So if you are willing to share, I definitely leave a comment down below, but hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. You can also turn my post notifications on if you want to be updated every time I upload, or you can follow me outside of YouTube on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, which are all Aonso. I'm currently streaming Life is Strange 3 on Twitch. It's so much fun. I definitely recommend checking it out. I'll put a link in the pinned comment, but otherwise, I really hope you guys enjoyed again, and I'll see you in the next one.